Munich here. This is Munich. How many? 1,000 Jews. This is in German the same. Yes, this is from Berlin, right? Yeah, Jüdische Gemeinde zu Berlin. And these are the Soviet war prisoners. And they are these French Jews, the two last ones. Now here, this is also, the inscriptions can also tell some story. Look here. This was made, here we can make a conclusion. That this was made not in the Stalin's period and even not later, because Jews are already mentioned here. You see? Here the name of 50,000 people, of course. It's in the Soviet time, yes? So the Russians of the first place. Jews are already Jews. It is said Jews, you see? Okay, and so on. But it is in the Russian period or Soviet. I speak already as an American. Okay, Lithuanian, Russian, and English. In the Soviet time, in English there were no inscriptions, only in Russian and Lithuanian. Today, no in Russian. Lithuanian and English, or Hebrew and so. Now this inscription is already after the independence, and that is why in Hebrew and in Yiddish and of course in English and so on. And this is already only about the Jews, 30,000 Jews.
30,000.
And the last, these are the French French people. Even deportees of convoy 73.
So this whole grassy area.
So where the people were shot on this field actually. This field was the shooting field. Or here they were buried. Now you see these houses, this is Kovno, and you see this residence area, it is halfway to the ghetto. So it's not so far. So they were marched there, here, around. This fence is not the old one, but it was on the same place, yes. Here into this trench. Inside, and you cannot run away from here. They all stand on the hill, yeah, and they shoot the people standing there or lying there.
I understood that most of the people didn't die all at once because you had said that after they shot the people, you could see the ground
they
moving.
That's right. Also, yeah, in many places.
There was a couple places where somebody said
they were wounded and they were covered. Yes,
sometimes one or two people could climb them, pull out.
Yes.
You know.
In 1943 was that burning of the bodies, what we were speaking there. Now this monument was erected in the Soviet time, and of course it was erected in memory and in honor of the Soviet people that suffered the Nazi occupation, not Nazi fascism. This was the formula in the Soviet Union. Fascist.
Before after Stalin died.
No, it was. This was erected. No, this was erected in 1980.
Oh, okay.
Late. Yeah. Of course, it looks very Soviet, such bombastic, megalomaniac. But we Soviet people, and I, most of my life was in the Soviet period. And we had allergy for the Soviet, art and so on. But the more I'm far from that period, the more I start to accept it. But really, it has power. Ceremony?
I think what we'll do is we'll go out of the sun. Let's walk down to the shady area
Yeah,
down
okay.
there. We'll do a Hazkara, or you'll hear the story, and then we'll do Mincha, and then we'll head on to the bus. Yes, there are feasts, you see. No, I didn't say so.
Sorry, if I could just mention a detail that one of the symbols over here that was explained to me on the last occasion that I was here is that these are hands. These are hands coming up out of the earth. I'm reaching to the
And who explained you that?
I was here last time.
Interesting. Because, not me, I don't like to explain art. Because art, the power of the art is that everybody sees what you see. For example, I had one Israeli economist, and he was from the or Iraqi or maybe Moroccan origin. Yeah. So he was his family didn't suffer in the Holocaust and so on. And he told me, I see here the broken Magen David. It's really, you see something there. Yeah? Actually, it is composition of three parts. The right one, they try to raise, but they can't. And then they see there, you see there the fists.
That's the resistance.
Yeah,
That's the Soviet resistance to the fascists.
Yes.
No, that's,
Standing is their
as Ulrich says, art
Art
by
is
nature
art,
should be
Here. No, I was just interested who said that, because I collect different impressions.
What will you down there to? This is called the sun as well.
No, that's really
Eternal remembrance of the victims.
Soviets denied, the Soviets never made a distinction. I don't know if Ruby pointed that out. The Soviets never made a distinction between Jewish victims of fascism and the Russian victims. Yeah. So this over here wasn't for Jews. This was because, that's it. They were all victims of fascism, so to speak. The same thing in Kornar, the same thing in all the places of mass execution. No, Nazism was fascism for them. One and the same. It was a fascist philosophy. Yeah.
So after the war, Nazism became out of parlance, so they didn't use it anymore. But Nazism
Nazism sort of.
yeah, so now Nazis.
Well, it's a dogmatic philosophy. I mean, fascism is that. Yulik, if I can just mention something here before we're going to be saying Kel Malay Rachmim, and I'm going to explain in a minute about that. There's just one other dimension I wanted to add, and that is the role of the partisans. We've mentioned it. We've mentioned the partisans in passing. I just want to look at it a little bit more closely. I did a 10-day course, teacher's course, training course at Yad Vashem about 2 years ago. And there was a person that stood up, one of our lecturers, and said that a number of people have asked after the Holocaust, why is it that more Jews didn't join the partisan units? One of the aspects which we've covered over here was that when the 64 broke out on that Christmas day, they went through the sewers, and as you can see, this is a very good point to look at it. Can you see the way that the fort is actually built under a hill, which is part of the fortification? And that was why you noticed that the walls were very wet and they were very cold, because it's subterranean water. There's water that's penetrating from around the hills and through the sand and going into the fortress underneath. When the Jews came out and they went through the sewers, as was explained to us, and they came out into the forests, there was no guarantee that they would survive. Now, there's nothing romantic about the forests. You didn't take food, so you had, what were you going to eat on a daily basis? There were a couple of berries, maybe some wild mushrooms, but there was no food. So they had to do these, so to speak, surreptitious attacks on farmers, or go in there and try and get a couple of eggs, some potatoes, and feed themselves, and then run back into the forest. They had no change of clothing. In summer there were mosquitoes and other insects. They were bitten to pieces, can you just imagine? In snow, in the winter, it was freezing cold, so you've got to keep yourself warm. It's not so easy. You need fuel. You need things that will burn. No shoes, that kind of thing. So, it's all very well to say to people, why didn't they become partisans? Because we're once again thinking militarily, and we're thinking about Eretz Yisrael, and we're thinking about armies with structure, with logistics. They say that an army runs on its stomach, and that's what people don't understand. And that was the problem with the Lebanon wars, by the way, that they didn't get enough food and logistics out there. Now, can you imagine with no infrastructure to try and survive in a forest? Can you imagine now taking women and children into a forest that almost become a liability? Because they can't move.
It was the worst winter in 100 years.
Very, very cold, correct. Another layer to the complexity of that issue is that there were different partisan groups that were antagonistic to one another. So, for example, and the other thing is, how do you get your arms and ammunition? How do you get the guns? And when you launch an attack on the Nazis, which they did, and we've heard of them blowing up railway lines, whatever it is. The Belsky Brothers is a perfect example, an outstanding movie. The Belsky brothers survived in the forests, and they went and they took, I think, how many people were there in their group?
Quite a few.
There were about 300.
Hundreds of people.
Let's say that there were several hundred people.
300.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie about the Belsky brothers. Apparently, they opened up a garage or repair shop in the States, and they didn't even tell anybody about it. And the story only came out afterwards, how these really tough Belsky brothers took a whole group of people, men, women and children, into the forest, and how they survived, and how they carried out these forays in attacking Nazis, blowing up convoys as they were coming through, blowing up railway lines, trying to just be disruptive as possible. So the other complexity was that there were also anti-Semitic fascist partisans in the forest. So, and they didn't want the Jews. So sometimes they would find friendly partisans that were against the fascists. But sometimes they had to be careful that the partisans that they were about to meet in the forest could kill them as Jews, despite the fact that they had a common enemy of the Nazis. The fascist partisans would kill the Jews, the Jewish partisans in the forest. So just once again, I'm reiterating, because you remember I said yesterday that the worst thing that we can talk about are like lambs to the slaughter. So even in a situation where there was an attempt to fight back, look at the difficulties that they experienced.
That's what happened in Poland. The Polish underground during the Warsaw Ghetto uprising wouldn't give them arms because they were Jews, you know.
Right. And that's all the more so why Mordechai Nilevich was so successful in making the Molotov cocktail, which was the bottle, a bottle with paraffin inside and a wick. So I just think that it's also very significant that we have Daniela Tannenwald with us today. Here's Daniela in the middle, known to us in South Africa as Darren, made Aliyah and went to live in Israel, and her parents have recently joined her and Ochi, her husband, and her children. And Daniela was telling us that her mother's grandmother, that makes it Daniela's great-grandmother, Chava Teibel, was brought here together with her two children, Herschel and Merka. And the three of them lie in one of the mass graves that we're standing at here today. And I think it's significant that, thank God, a survivor is here and all of us are with her. So we're going to ask Rev. Aaron Wallace to step forward and to say Kel Malay Rachamim
He's below you.
Yeah, in their memory. And please God, the neshomas should get an aliyah from the tefillot and also from the nachas that they get from their children and great-grandchildren, that they carry forward all the values that they stood for.
Like an individual one or the general?
And we should say for them, and then you can say all Yehudim.
We'll just add the name in.
We'll just add in their names.
So what are we doing first?
We'll slip the names in.
We'll put in the names as well. I'll give you the names when you get there.
Mole Rachamim Shochem Ameromim Amtze Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei Ashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Teorim Kezohar Arakia Mazirim את כל הנשמות של 6 מיליון היהודים חללי השואה באירופה שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו ושנספו על קידוש השם וביניהם האישה חווה טייבל, הרשל טייבל, מרקה טייבל שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו ושנספו על קידוש השם בידי המרצחים הגרמנים הנאצים ועוזריהם משאר העמים. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימין, ונאמר אמן.
We're going to say Kaddish, and then afterwards we'll daven mincha here.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויאמר יברך ירוסי וימליך מלכוסי, וחייכון וימכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל, והגלה ומזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקדושה וריחו לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן יהי שלום רבה מן שמיים וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן ויעשה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן